Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. My name is David, this is David K Reacts, and today I'm going to be looking at a video I've been very much looking forward to ever since I came across Sabaton, and that is their single, Bismarck. This one's an interesting one. I didn't realize this was actually requested by fans extensively, and so it was a gift from the band to their fans for their 20th anniversary. This is according to the Sabaton wiki. And it's not actually on an album, it's a single in and of its own right. So that is very, very cool. In answer to the immediate question, perhaps, of why am I a little more dressed up than usual, that's because we'll see where the nature of the song goes, but I have not really a connection to this per se, but a connection to somebody involved in the events surrounding the Bismarck, and I wanted to take a moment to recognize that, which I will do later in this video. But I will explain the get-up. But in the meantime, I am very, very keen to welcome Sabaton back to the channel because I absolutely loved Christmas Truce. I thought that was fantastic, and I'm really excited to see more of their work. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome if you haven't been here before. If that is the case, just so you know the way how this works, I'm going to watch the video straight through, emote, comment, all that sort of thing, but not pause. And then I will go back and watch it through again, interrupting, pausing, offering what commentary and analysis I feel like I can. So if you're just here for the reaction, the first quarter or so of this video will be for you, but then there's going to be a little bit at the end as well, with me talking further about some history. So maybe the first sixth or so of this video is for you, if you're just here for the reaction. Please do like the video if you enjoy it, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you'd like to know each time one of my videos comes out. I aim for Fridays at 5 PM EST. And if you would care to, feel free to head over to buymeacoffee.com/DavidKReacts, where you can support the channel if you feel like I have in some way enhanced your enjoyment of this song, simply, you know, provided some cool information, whatever it happens to be. That would be very kind of you if you choose to do that. Also, lastly, apologies, I'm a little croaky today. Don't quite know why, but this is my recording opportunity for this week, so we're just going to have to, that's going to have to be a thing, and I apologize for that. I think then, without further delay, I'm going to jump in and check this video out. I know a reasonable amount about this action, about the ship and the action that I'm assuming it's going to cover, which I imagine will be the sinking of the Bismarck. There's actually a movie, goodness knows, I haven't actually seen it to know how accurate it may or may not be, called Sink the Bismarck, starring Kenneth More, if I remember correctly, which I know because when I grew up working in semi-professional theatre, I worked at the Kenneth More Theatre. And this is back in the UK, in Ilford, in Essex, and the safety curtain had pictures of, it was like a collage of all the different posters of Kenneth More films, and that was one of them. But I haven't actually seen it, so. Anyway, I'm diving off track. Let's bring this up, and let's listen to what Sabaton, let's turn that on, Sabaton's take is on Bismarck. Already loving the production value. Modern day, interesting.
Which blew up the mighty battle cruiser Hood.
It did indeed. For context, for those who don't know, Bismarck sank in 1941, so I'm interested already by the modern clothing and setting.
So, did you find the boat?
I love this setup, whatever it is.
ship is taking foam, and the silence
Oh, I like
of
this.
the seas are bound to drift into a
Yes.
storm.
Oh, that visual.
Show of force, raise the anchor, battleship guarding its course. Rise up a nation of beasts made of steel.
That it was.
Motion, king of the ocean, he was made to rule the waves across the seven seas.
Oh, I love it. This is great.
To lead the war machine, to rule the waves and lead the Kriegsmarine.
Oh, wow.
The terror of the seas, the Bismarck and the Kriegsmarine. 2,000 men and 50,000 tons of steel set the course for the Atlantic with the Allies on the hill.
This references my connection, those planes, later.
Firefight! Battle stations keep the targets steady in sight. Into formation, the hunt has begun. Defend a nation. The fleet is coming. He was made to rule the waves across the seven seas.
I love this melody. This is great.
The war machine to rule the waves and lead the Kriegsmarine. The terror of the seas, the Bismarck and the Kriegsmarine.
I love, yet again, the quality of the video. It's phenomenal.
At the bottom of the ocean, the depths of the abyss, they are bound by iron and blood. The flagship of the Navy, the terror of the seas, his guns have gone silent at last.
Yes. Go, Tommy.
Pride of a nation of beasts made of steel. Bismarck in motion, king of the ocean, he was made to rule the waves across
I'm just watching now. This is so good. I love their production values so much, both of the music and of the video.
The terror of the seas, the Bismarck and the Kriegsmarine. To lead the war machine, rule the waves and lead the Kriegsmarine. The terror of the seas, Bismarck and the Kriegsmarine. To lead the war machine, rule the waves and lead the Kriegsmarine. The terror of the seas, Bismarck and the Kriegsmarine.
Oh, that's a shame. The tag is over the top of it. Oh, Atlantic. Okay, there we go. I was going to say, I think it's Atlantic. That is such a good video. What a great song. I really like that. I mean, I know Christmas Truce, based on comments that were left on my video, I understand that it had higher production values because they took time during the pandemic to put that together and really, kind of dig into it. And I think my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is they really kind of went all out +1 for that. But I feel like they went all out on this one. That is fantastic. The quality of their production is so high. It really is remarkable and fantastic song. So the music to this song, of course, written by Joachim. If you don't know the band, he's the singer who is leading this and is also the keyboard player. And lyrics by Joachim and Per, who is the bassist. Bassist? Do I have that right? Let me hang on. I have a note somewhere. Yes, bassist. They've done a fabulous job with this. It's great because it takes a minute to pay tribute to what was an astonishing accomplishment in many ways, even though it didn't ultimately pan out the way it was supposed to. And a very brave crew that did fight till the end. There's a transmission that is known from whoever was captaining it at the time, and I know as different elements of the ship began to lose contact, who was in command at any given moment shifted. But there was a transmission sent saying, we can't survive anymore, we will fight to the last man. Which is a wonderful, with no comment on sides in this at all. The dedication to that is extraordinary. It says right here, war knows no nation. And that's true. That's true. It might be nations that start wars. I'm not going to go into the politics of it, of course. That's not what this video is about. But it's not a nation that is there on the ground fighting it. And I love that they've dedicated to those who fought to the bitter end in the Battle of the Atlantic. That's not to the crew of the Bismarck, although they are certainly a part of that. There are a lot of people who did exactly that. This was a very different time of war. Hopefully one we will never know again. Although I think that's right now a very relative comment, because I think there are people in the world right now who know exactly that, and I think there always have been. Hopefully one day that won't be the case. But this is wonderful. I loved that. It's catchy, but still has a lot of, it's a complicated piece of music at the same time. It's stunning, very, very powerful. This is fantastic. So let's go back and look at this again. A moment of history for those who aren't familiar. The Bismarck was... Oh, incidentally, one thing that was brought to my attention is that Sabaton does history videos on all of these. I did watch this one just to see what they covered, to see whether my connection was likely to come up. So you do check that out. I skipped all the parts with the band, of course, so that this could still be a fresh reaction. But they cover this. But in brief, the Bismarck was one of 2 Bismarck-class battleships. The other was the Tirpitz, that were created in 1938, I want to say, to be the pride of the Kriegsmarine, the German Navy. They wholly breached the treaties that they had with England and France, which said that they had a limitation on the tonnage of the vessels they could create and on the overall tonnage of the Kriegsmarine. And it was supposed to, the treaty that was put in place after World War I was supposed to state that the German Navy could never challenge the English or French navies effectively. These obviously breached that quite significantly. And when these came out, they were the king of the seas. They were huge battleships, the likes of which hadn't been seen before, and they were going to be a significant threat. And so a lot of effort was basically put onto putting them down and taking them out of action. When that eventually did happen was 1941. The Bismarck travelled across the north of England to come down into the Atlantic. It was supposed to meet up with the Scharnhorst, which is another German battleship. I'll come on to that later. Travelling with the Prinz Eugen. And the Bismarck and the Prinz Eugen engaged the British Navy and actually sank the HMS Hood, which was a significant blow to the British Navy at the time, damaged the Prince of Wales. And then that caused the English to chase the Bismarck down. and in May, the end of May 1941, it was hunted down, and over the next couple of days was basically crippled and destroyed. There was a team that came from France and came up north to kind of pincer it, and that included the Ark Royal, which was an aircraft carrier that eventually launched Fairy Swordfish, which you saw. I mentioned they will ultimately be my connection that I'll discuss after my analysis. But the Fairy Swordfish was a craft that was ancient even before the war started. It was made of canvas, string, and wood. It had an open cockpit. It was a crazy thing, but it was a very effective torpedo bomber because it was kind of weird, and so it caught the enemy forces off guard. And a torpedo from a Swordfish struck the rudder of the Bismarck, which left it turning in circles. It couldn't do anything else. Its rudder was completely jammed. And before they could get out of that situation, I imagine that's probably when the transmission was sent that I mentioned earlier. And before they could get out of that situation, they were descended upon by the British Navy, the battleships King George V and Rodney, and the heavy cruisers Norfolk and Dorsetshire. And they basically put it into a checkmate situation, and the Germans scuttled the ship rather than risk it being boarded by British forces. So that's the sort of a brief history of what could have been a much more, well, it was a genuinely terrifying warship, but it didn't get to impact as fully as was intended. Anyway, with all that history borne in mind, let's go back and check this out again, and I will this time be interrupting and commenting on this video as we go. And I feel like there's going to be quite a lot to say. This is so interesting. I think for this video particularly, this immediately modern setting. Like, we're seeing a town, we're seeing ships that are identifiably modern in the harbour, we're seeing these jeeps come up, they're clearly not, that's not a jeep from 1941. So we're immediately in a setting looking back. And it's a very quick, very effective setup before the song is anywhere near being started.
Engines on that German battleship, which blew up the mighty battlecruiser Hood.
Even there on the radio, you get that flash of blew up the battlecruiser Hood, which, yes, as I mentioned, it did that. And that was, days before it itself was sunk. But in those days in between, it must have been a source of great fear to have this ship out here that was capable of tackling the British Navy the way that it did.
Comes by wireless and has spotted the plane's man.
I love the uniformity here. There's a casualness about it that's, you don't have military discipline. It's not like they're marching in formation or anything like that, but they all look very uniform in the hoodies and the sort of, what would that be, a winter camo? Or an urban camo, I guess. Very effective at creating cohesion straight away. We'll also differentiate them in a moment from the ship captain of the ship they are going to perform on, because he looks different, and so it sets the band apart from them. I love this as well. Firstly, I like that we get Joachim coming in first, so setting him up as the lead of this. But also, I love these bits of memorabilia. So straight away, we can see stuff behind. Even amongst, you've got the fishing gear and what have you. But here, enemy of the something, the battle of the battleship Bismarck, rather. The photographs are interesting. I wonder if that implies that the captain here knew somebody on board. I'm interested by that photograph that's sandwiched between the two frames on the left. I'm wondering if that's a character later in the film. And of course, this incredibly imposing silhouette of what was at the time, one of the most advanced pieces of metal out on the water. And then here, I'd be interested to know, medal aficionados, do we know what this medal is? I don't recognize it personally. I have no idea if that's, I assume from the coloring it's a German medal, but I couldn't say which one. Would be interested to know if you happen to know the answer to that.
So, did you find the boat?
For a second, the first time through, I thought they meant they found that boat. I had just a second there before my mind caught up and went, oh no, they're about to go out. Now this is nice. I love that we get the setup montage of the band taking all the stuff out of the van. And then we get this glimpse at this compass. Now, my guess, and I'd be interested to know if this is accurate, because I haven't looked up the coordinates, but my guess is that this is the coordinates where the ship sank. Is this a true story? Did somebody escape with a compass that indicated where the ship went down? I do not know that story, and I would love to know if that's true. I don't think it was... No, it wasn't touched on in the video. I didn't quite finish it, but I read the transcript. But yes, I like that we get this now, and we don't understand the significance of it until later. Interesting, too, that later it's delivered into the hands of the British. So not sure who the captain actually is, but... Unless it's... Is it the same person, maybe? Is it the... Oh, no, hang on, I'm being an idiot. He never actually handed it over, did he? So this is the sailor going back. Oh, I like that even more. That's lovely. If I'm right about that. And I like that we're getting the beginning of the song under this, setting us up for the performance that's going to happen, even while we're still kind of montaging them getting on their way. And there's something nice too... I'm sorry, I'm going to stop a lot in this. There's something nice too about just the respect of standing there at ease. You know, there's no motion on the ship right now until the song begins in earnest. I love that we go straight into this really, really strong ostinato riff that we're getting here. It's very identifiable. I like that it's fairly standard, or fairly common, I should say, metal pattern, I think, there, of starting on the tonic and then going down to the seventh. Da, 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 with the chords. So two repeats of the ostinato on the tonic, and then 2 repeats on the 7th below it. It's a nice setup. It gives us something. It gives us something to latch onto straight away, which is very effective. I also just love that not much has changed. Like, the lights are on, but it's not particularly dark. They're almost more effect than they are. Like, they're not illuminating the band. The band is already illuminated, but we get cool things. Like, if we look here, I'm trying to see who is who among the flurry of hair right now. Yeah, hair in the middle. So I'm guessing it's... I think it's Chris? I'm losing my point now. Where is it? Is that Chris on the left? I think, or is that Tommy? I can't quite tell. Anyway, sorry, I'm whoever it is on the left, under all the hair, you get this lovely hair light that's being created right there, just on over here, where the moving. Oh, hang on, I'm on the wrong screen. Here, where the moving light is behind, it's creating these cool hair lights. Like, those effects are what are being created by the lighting state that we're seeing now. It's not illumination, it's effect. We get the cool reds behind, the flame coming up. None of this is lighting anybody with a primary light, it's just giving effect to the shot that we've got. And it's great because it gives an immense amount of power to something when they're outdoors, in overcast weather, but daylight. So it's harder to achieve those effects, and I think the way they've gone about it in this is really smart. That's very cool. I like the little intercut too of the still guitar playing that ostinato, while in the actual video there's a full rock out going on, and the guitar motion is much more. You wouldn't be able to, if you focused on the guitar while they're doing all of this, you wouldn't be able to actually see what's going on clearly. Also, one thing that I did notice there too. Sorry, I keep going back, but this is just a cool thing, and I'm curious to know about it myself. Right there, you can see that piece of gaff tape hanging off the bottom of Hannes's symbol, the crash symbol that's there. Now, or is that the ride? No, that's the crash, I think. I know that one thing you can do is just change the sound of drums and cymbals by adding something to them. So, you put a towel down on a drum and it dampens the sound a little bit. You fill a bass drum usually with a big piece of fabric, because you want the big cavernous size of it to have the boom, but you don't want it to be as echoey as it is when it's empty, usually. Is that why that's there? I assume it is, because I assume there's no other reason for it to still be hanging there. But I just caught it, and I'm curious. My assumption is that he tapes the bottom of the cymbals and it in some way changes the sound, but it's purely guesswork. I can drum, but I am no drummer. So curious to know. Moving on. It's a very dynamic introduction. There's no moment during there, I don't think, except maybe, and I'm not going to go back on it, but maybe when we're seeing the close-up on the guitarist, there's no moment where the camera is still. It's in motion all the time. There's a lot of quick cuts of the close-ups, so we're seeing people, but we're seeing them very quickly. And then we're pulling back to group shots, usually. We've got a single here that I think is going to move into a group, but it's usually 2 or 3 people in the shot at any given moment, and there's a lot of movement of the camera. Very effective, gives us a lot of dynamism, also gives you a little bit of a feeling like you're on the boat with them, because that boat is not going to be still, moving or not. It's going to be subject to the currents in the water, and so it gives us a little bit more immersion into their video.
From the mist, a ship is taking form, and the silence of the seas are bound to drift into a storm.
That must have been terrifying. If you were out at sea and you saw something of this... Now, obviously, they're in a civilian fishing boat. They're not in a destroyer or a cruiser or something like that. But seeing something the scale of the Bismarck coming out of the mist, like that can't have been a good feeling at the time. I love that. The silence of the sea is about to drift into a storm. It's not the boats drifting into the storm, it's the sea is about to be, shaken up by the battle. I love, they did this in Christmas Truce as well, the comment on silence. Because you think about war, you think about battles, you think about gunfire, explosions, all that sort of thing. You don't often think about the silence. But there, I feel like silence is probably a relative term. There's engines, there's people running all around you, all that sort of thing. But war, I imagine, having never been to it myself, has long periods of being very quiet. And it tends not to be what we think about. And I like that they put the focus on that. Because it is, battle is disruption. Not just to what's going on around it, but to the moment that it happens as well. And I think it's their focus on silence, their mention of silence in both of these videos, I think is extremely potent and indicative of how violent war is. It's great. Love it.
Sign of power, show of force, raise the anchor, battleships guarding its course, pride of a nation of...
Okay, just before we get into this sort of pre-chorus, yeah, the Bismarck was a show of force. Absolutely. It was the German Kriegsmarine basically saying, look what we can do. And it should, had it hung around longer, had it been able to actually hang out in the Atlantic and harry shipping. I know they were terrified. My understanding is that Hitler was terrified of antagonizing the Americans at this point in the war. And so I think was also a little bit cautious of doing anything with the Kriegsmarine. But if the Bismarck had reached full potential, it would have been a real problem. I like this here, Pride of a Nation, a beast made of steel. Very, very much, I think what it was. And I think they were right to be proud of this, because for all of its flaws, and I know one of them was that the simple act of firing its guns, because they were so big, actually ended up damaging their radar system to the point where the Suffolk and the Norfolk that were shadowing them, they were British warships that were shadowing them around the British coast, were not detected very easily because they had messed up their own radar in the process of firing their guns. So there were issues with it. But those put to one side, what an extraordinary thing to put out on the water. And of course, nowadays we're capable of more. But at the time, this was huge. In every sense of the word.
Guarding its course, pride of a nation of beasts made of steel. Bismarck in motion, king of the ocean, he was made to rule the waves across the seven seas.
I really, really like what they've done musically there. This change... Oh, gonna go back one more. Both the drums and the in the whole rhythm section where you've got this dunk da da ka da da dunk da da ka da da dunk da da ka. It's a very consistent. You get that sense of motion. This is we've got this thing of their ship is moving. The ships that in the imagination are coming towards the Bismarck in old times are moving. The Bismarck itself is moving. There's a very motion-based rhythm going on right now, and then we get this change here.
Raise the anchor, battleships guarding its course. Pride of a nation of beasts made of steel.
Right there, that change to this boom, poof, boom, poof. Like the shift of the beat is much. It's gone from you don't have that kind of triplet feel going on. It's just gone into this very, very much focus on the beat. You could almost take out that the cymbals in between and just have this doom, poof, doom, poof. It's a marching. It's a very martial rhythm. It's a very marching kind of rhythm. The pace that it's happening at, you could imagine like a march to that. But it's also very bombastic. It's kind of like beating the chest a little bit as we're getting these lyrics about pride in the ship. It's a great example of the music shifting to thoroughly support the lyrics that are being sung on top of it. It's fantastic.
Pride of a nation of beasts made of steel. Bismarck in motion, king of the ocean, he was made to rule the waves across the seven seas. To lead the war machine, to rule the waves and lead the Kriegsmarine.
And this is great because we go into like this whole section here that I just let play through. We've gone from all of this. Right here, we're still seeing the band in that, twilight, I guess, rather than daylight. But it's still bright enough. The way it's being filmed, the lights are effective, but like I said earlier, they're not primary lighting. And then we get this shift as we go into the battle. And it's here, was the moment we cut back to the band, once the fight has begun, we can now have all this effect lighting, these bright lights like we're getting here. The flames are suddenly much more potent because it's dark. We're getting a lot of effect suddenly poured into the video, and it then shifts into the ships fighting at dark, more in the dark later. And you get this wonderful ostinato playing underneath. It's so powerful when it comes back. And the drums have shifted back a little bit into a bit more of that sort of dum da ka ka da dum da ka rhythm, but they feel heavier, even though I'm not sure they are much. But because we have this repetition now, this ostinato, there's a familiarity to it, so it sits more. This is also, what a shot right there. I love the power of this, the lights down on the band, and this is the fishing boat. Right? There's much bigger ships in this, but the way this is lit, the angle that they're shooting from for this, was this a drone or a helicopter? I don't know. But wow, this is just a gorgeous, gorgeous shot right there. And here we see the Ark Royal. So my assumption would be, I would imagine the Bismarck was probably fighting the King George V and the Rodney. I don't know. I can't do ship silhouettes. Like I can make contextual guesses. This is obviously the Ark Royal right here. I forget the ships. This is Group H, I think it was called. I forget the ships that were supporting the Ark Royal. But, you know, by default of the fact that it's an aircraft carrier, it's the Ark Royal. That's the aircraft carrier that was in the fight. I can't remember if the King George V and the Rodney were present in the fight at this point, or whether they were in Group H catching up. Maybe it was Norfolk and Suffolk. Anyway, question mark. If anybody knows, I'm curious. I'm no good at and I don't want to sit here pulling up ship identification patterns and trying to figure it out, because that's complicated, and I don't want this video to be too long. But now we get this this cool view. So the Bismarck had already been engaged. Group H, featuring the Ark Royal here, is coming up from the south, coming to meet the fight that's already in progress, and it's bringing with it its cargo of fairy swordfish. Fairy, by the way, spelled Fairey. It's the name of the manufacturer. And we see them sitting on the deck here. This is 825 Naval Air Squadron. Made up of the swordfish. So yeah, let's go back a little bit. Oops. What's going on? There we go. Sorry about that. I like too that we get this moment of plotting. This is presumably, is this the Ark Royal? Maybe. But we get this sense of plotting to see where the ship, because this is also a part of combat. Naval combat is in motion. Ships don't stand still at sea. If you stand still, you get blown out of the water because you become a sitting duck, quite literally. So there's always motion going on. There's always plotting. The navigators are going to be very busy trying to figure out what's going on and where they should be pointing and blah, 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 blah. So it's, you know, there's a lot to it. And it's nice that we get a little cut to one of these moments, because it shows a lot of what goes on. The thought and the detail that Sabaton puts into their history is astonishing. I love it. 2,050,000. So this is the fairy swordfish. I'm going to stop here just to talk about it for a second, because this was critical in the destruction of the Bismarck. These things, like I said, they were made of canvas, string, and wood for the most. Obviously, the engine was metal. But, you know, they're not an advanced aircraft. They are a torpedo bomber. You'll notice they have a single torpedo sitting underneath the fuselage. Once they've dropped that, their purpose in the fight is done. They then turn around and head back. There are 3 people in their aircraft. There's the pilot, who we see a close-up of in a minute, sitting up front behind a windscreen, flying the thing. Then behind him is the navigator, if I remember rightly. Yes, I think that's the right order. Who's going to be telling, you know, saying where to go and what to do and looking at the maps. And then behind them is the telegraphist air gunner, who is going to... they have a single Vickers machine gun on a pintle mount, pointing backwards. So the swordfish can't fire in front of it. It can only attack things, you know, bearing in mind I've sat in one of these things. You're in a, you know, it's a tight space and you're moving around like this. You can only move that gun as far as you can. You know, if you turn it and face it the other way, you're going to smack yourself in the head. So it's a very limited effect that this aircraft can actually have. And what is astonishing is a couple of times they were extremely effective, and this is one of them. Because one of those torpedoes, the likelihood of being hit in the rudder as a ship is tiny, and yet somehow one of the torpedoes from one of the swordfish hit the port rudder of the Bismarck, and that is what enabled it to be hunted down. If that hadn't happened, things could have ended very, very differently. So these are an astonishingly critical part of this, despite the fact that they are ancient before the war even begins. So there we can see, if I just, I'm going to very selectively, hang on, let me just do, boop.
2,000 men and 50,000 tons of steel.
There we can see the three people. So there's your pilot up the front, the gunner at the back, and were they called navigators? That's going to annoy me. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back. It was the observer, not the navigator, although I suspect, you know, probably in many ways similar purpose. That's my lesson on the swordfish, but I do think it's important to go through because I think they're represented here, and I think they're something that you might not think was as critical, especially because you see the ships fighting more later than you do see anything from although we see the aircraft, I think, drop their torpedoes, if I remember correctly. You know, they're a much more critical part of this than that might suggest.
2,000 men and 50,000 tons of steel.
That's a lot. Can you think about... I mean, one, ships are incredible, but 50,000 tons sitting on the ocean. That's a big piece of metal with 2,000 men inside it. That's, again, a lot of people. That's a big ship. You know, battleships they were built to be big, but even so, that's a big ship. And yes, set course for the Atlantic. So this is the thing. They went across. Nobody since Napoleon's time had got through the English Channel. Like the British defenses were too strong. We defended that channel, you know, very, very hard. And so they went the whole way across the top of England and came back down the west coast past Ireland down towards the Atlantic that way. So they took a very long way, which is also why, you know, I think we were able to hunt them down, was because there was a lot of time for ships to know where they were going to be going and to sort of take stock of that and set course to intercept. I'm just going back a bit. Oh, there we get our shot of the pilot, too, at the swordfish. Note how he's in the open air. Like, it must have been very cold, especially on a day that it's raining. Like, you have your flight goggles and your scarf and whatever else, but it still must have been freezing cold.
2,000 men and 50,000 tons of steel. Set the course for the Atlantic with the Allies on the hill. Firepower!
I'm not sure what that aircraft was that just flew by there. This guy. I recognize it. I don't know what it's called. But I guess it was maybe like the aerial observation. Unsure. Again, if anyone knows, let me know. And so there we see the Bismarck being hit by a torpedo. As far as I understand it, 2 torpedoes hit it. One hit below, just basically hit the armor and caused some minor flooding and you know, some problems, but didn't really do a lot. It was the one that hit the rudder that did the damage. That looked like it was the one that hit the armor. I can't remember now if we see the other one, but anyway, I'm talking a lot about the history here, but it's so fascinating, and I think they're representing it really, really well in this. Sorry, one more thing. Notice also how low the swordfish are flying to the sea. That's the other thing. They could fly incredibly low, drop the torpedoes from a very low height. And the great thing with that was very advantageous to them, is it was difficult for the guns on the decks of especially larger ships to get low enough to fire back. Like, the shots would just go over the top. So when they got so low, it was actually really difficult to attack them effectively. Actually, I wonder if that might have been the shot that hit the rudder, because it looks like the ship is then turning round, stuck in its rotation at that point in time. But yeah, I love this line. He was made to rule the waves across the 7 seas. Again, huge ambitions for what this ship could have done. Going back a little step, because I was focusing on the visuals for a second there. Oh my wow, what a shot this is. I love that shot, with all the tracer fire passing overhead. That's extraordinary. This is so good. It's so, the melody, the that riff that's going on consistently underneath. This song, it's so recognizable. It's so, like, they've really done a great job of making something that would be, it's going to be in my head for a long time. It's absolutely fantastic. And I love, like, this shot again. All these shots are so beautifully done. And I love that we get this intercut of the old ships, the old crew, the modern ship, and the band. And I don't think we see the captain again until the very end. But it's so impactful, these shifts between. And it's cool because you get that sense of the band paying respect. Especially because, you know, my assumption from the shot of the ship as the Bismarck was coming out of the fog, having the small boat next to them, was that they are on that site, and so they are there paying respect in modern times to what happened in the past, and so we're intercutting between the two of them. This is an incredible, I cannot get over how good this is.
The terror of the seas, the Bismarck and the Kriegsmarine.
So now we start seeing this fight happen, and we go into this really cool little instrumental section. Again, very, very identifiable. Very, like, it's easy to pick up on, and it's easy to keep in mind, and I think that makes it a really cool musical motif that they're using here. And while this is going on, we start seeing the key moments where they were saying, you know, he's made to rule the waves and lead the Kriegsmarine, and now we're seeing the beginning of the fall of the Bismarck. And, you know, that's not going to be the case after all. I mean, huge diversion to the British forces. And, you know, I know there were French and Polish, I think, forces involved in the attack as well. Possibly more than that. But, you know, it caused a distinct amount of disruption to everything else that was going on. So, you know, in a way, it did something, but certainly not what it was supposed to. So I'm assuming that this, if I'm correct, is the King George V that this captain is on, because I believe that was the ship that first hit the Bismarck, which is sort of what we're seeing here. And then how lovely that we get that long-held note over the, you know, we've seen the explosion as the ship was hit, but now we have that long-held note, seeing it listing so badly, on fire. Was that a gunshot there, or was that an explosion? Oh no, that's the guns still. So this is their thing. They will continue firing the guns until the end, and there we see it. The guns are still firing, despite the fact that the ship is very clearly not long to be on the surface of the water.
At the bottom of the ocean, the depths of the abyss, they are bound by iron and blood. The flag.
And there we see, this is, I believe I read somewhere, this is possibly the only occurrence in history, at least at this point in time, of a battleship torpedoing another battleship. But they did actually put some torpedoes in the water and do some more damage before it was eventually sunk by gunfire and the Germans scuttling it. I cannot get over the amount of detail that they have put into this. And I love where we go with this, at the bottom of the ocean, bound in iron and blood.
They are bound by iron and blood. The flagship of the Navy, the terror of the seas, his guns have gone silent at last.
That's his gun. We're back to silence. His guns have gone silent at last. You know, even though it was fighting back till the last minute, that's it. This is the tribute to the end of the ship at this point in time. And then we go into Tommy's incredible guitar solo here.
Gone silent at last.
And now everything is so red tinged as well. Like the lighting on this ship, the way that we see the band, there's so much red in it, and then these really cool flashes of light. You know, we had earlier the flickering, the sort of strobe that, you know, could have effectively been gunfire and explosions. Was, I think, what they were trying to create there, and now we're getting this incredible, like this counterpoint of the red and the yellow here is extraordinary. Yes, Tommy. That's a great solo, and then again left on this long lingering note, and you have a more peaceful scene with the captain once again looking out with the binoculars, and you know, we saw him like ducking earlier when they were back under gunfire again, barking orders into the phone, and now everything is a little bit calmer because the battle has essentially been won at this stage. I also love that the guitars have the same camo pattern they were wearing earlier. Just very cool. I love this shift into this ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-bum. It's something we haven't heard before, and it's highlighting the importance of this moment, the importance of this sailor getting the compass that has the final coordinates of the Bismarck, assuming I'm correct about that. And having that moment of him acquiring this and getting off the ship. Like he survives this fight. It must be, like, what a powerful thing to see a ship going down. Like, awful. The loss of life is terrible, as it is throughout all war. There's an extraordinary majesty, whatever nation a ship fights for. These are marvels of technology. And, you know, it's a sad thing, too, to see a ship going down, however much it's been fighting against you. But this is a powerful shot right here. Like, the detail they've gone into even here. We see a sailor swimming away in the foreground. There's people trying to hold on and climb over the railing as the ship is tilting away from them. I just can't get over the quality of Sabaton's videos. This is crazy.
Pride of a nation, a beast made of steel. Bismarck in motion, king of the ocean. He was made to rule the waves across the seven seas.
And even there, pride of the nation. Yeah, it was. And it remains so in memory. Like, what an extraordinary accomplishment that is still, you know, we're talking about it to this day because of the impact that it had in its brief time at sea, active. You know, that's huge.
To lead the war machine, to rule the waves and lead the Kriegsmarine. The terror of the seas, the Bismarck and the Kriegsmarine. To lead the war machine, rule the waves and lead the Kriegsmarine.
Interesting, they're playing with time a little bit here. If we listen to this, they've cut some beats out.
And the Kriegsmarine. To lead the war machine, rule the waves and lead the Kriegsmarine.
Nope, one again.
The terror of the seas, Bismarck and the Kriegsmarine. To lead the war machine, rule the waves and lead the Kriegsmarine.
The terror of the war machine rule the waves. Like the run on there. It's great because it gives this motion to the ending of this. And they don't need to say it was made to rule the waves again. It's really smart lyric writing. It's really smart use of music. This is just great. Really, really effective. Interesting. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know my uniforms as well, but normally would the sailors' hats not be identified with the ship that they're on? That's maybe the one thing where I'm looking at this going, is that right? Would that not say, you know, HMS Norfolk, HMS King George V. The Dorsetshire was the last ship firing on it, so this might be the Dorsetshire. Although I wonder if maybe, for effect, they've made it the King George V, but not sure. And there again, I love that. The Terror of the Seas, Bismarck, and the Kriegsmarine with those hits. They cut the beat out. They cut like it focuses on the vocals for a second there. That's such a powerful ending.
The Terror of the Seas, Bismarck, and the Kriegsmarine.
It's just the vocals and the harmony. This is so good. What a wonderful song. This is brilliant. And then you get this lovely last shot of the compass, which I assume is him saying, well, I found it. This is where it happened. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And I love a couple of things about this. I love that we have the, that was a huge, very energetic performance, and I love that you kind of get that sense of, poof, we're done. But also because this was a song I know that Sabaton wanted to write for a long time, and it hadn't fit in with any of their albums. And so I like that there's almost a sense of we managed it, we did it. And then I love that War Knows No Nation comes up. We don't go to black and then see that. It comes up over the end of the video. This is a part of the message. Yes, they're going to dedicate this in a minute. But war affects everybody. And I love that that comes up first. And I love... Oh, there we go, onto the adverts. I love that we get that... we end out on the sound of the radio. It's just a really effective ending. Wow, that's good! That's a fantastic piece of music. I'm really glad... I saw that. Several people have recommended it to me. Can I pull any names up? I should have checked this at the beginning. I didn't. No, I've only written down me. I'm sorry, I've got really bad at writing down names of people who recommend something if I know it's already on my list. I shouldn't do that. I should be marking down everybody. My spreadsheet got out of control, so I just have a list right now, which is... I need to sort myself back out again. But thank you to anyone who recommended this song. That is extremely potent. And I really enjoyed that. I thought they did an absolutely fantastic job with representing the visuals, with writing a song that is respectful and honoring, something that was incredible that, didn't last. But there were people on that ship who fought and died with honor. And there are people that were attacked by that ship who fought and died with honor. And the War Knows No Nation it's great because they are singing about one ship and its position at the head of one navy, and it is the battle is so much more than just that. So I think that's great. I think they did a really respectful job of that, and I think they did an extraordinary job of representing the history through the video, through the lyrics, and I think through the way the music was performed. It also put different emphasis on different lyrics, different feeling, and that was just an all-round incredible performance. I really, really enjoyed that. Before I go on to my final section of this, I did just want to say thank you for being with me. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and you've got something out of it. Please do like it if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to be alerted each time one of my videos comes out. And if you would care to, head over to buymeacoffee.com/DavidKReacts. And you can donate to support the channel there if it's something you would like to do. Sorry for the cut there, I just had to run upstairs. Oh, my lighting looks a little different. Oh, that's fine. Just had to run upstairs and sort something out quickly. But I did want to just talk for a couple of minutes about my connection to this. I say that it's loosely a connection to this. It's an indirect connection through somebody who was involved in the process of attacking the Bismarck, although they weren't actually shown in this video. As I previously mentioned, the swordfish that we saw taking off from the Ark Royal were made. They were it was 820 I said 825 earlier, I misspoke. It was 820 Naval Air Squadron. 825 Naval Air Squadron was another batch of Swordfish. And at the time of the Bismarck sinking, they were based on the HMS Victorious. And they actually, a couple of days before the Bismarck was sunk, they launched an attack of their own. And they were basically ineffective. Unfortunately, the conditions were awful, to the point where, I can't remember if it was an admiral or even one of the Sea Lords, commented on the bravery of the squadron for simply going out and doing what they did. They flew 120 miles, I think. 120? Yes. In genuinely shocking weather. And you saw how open those plains were. You know, if it was raining, you got rained on. And they flew all that way and attempted to attack the Bismarck. And I think they did strike it with one torpedo. There were 9 Swordfish in that attack, and I think they did strike it with one torpedo, but it didn't actually really achieve much. The Bismarck was extremely heavily armoured, and it was only, it was the chance hit on the rudder that let that torpedo later on have such a huge effect on the process of attacking the battleship. And this one torpedo from 825 Squadron just didn't achieve anything, unfortunately. However, the attack by 825 Squadron, 2 days before this video, was led by one Eugene Esmond. And the reason that I have a connection to this is that Eugene Esmond continued to fly as the leader of 825 Squadron. And in February 1942, he led them out once again, this time to attack the Scharnhorst and the Gneisenau and the Prinz Eugen. And this was an action that came to be known as the Channel Dash. Basically what happened was the Kriegsmarine were recalling the German ships to Germany, I believe because, if I remember rightly, I think Hitler was afraid the Brits were going to attack from Scandinavia. And so he wanted the major elements of his fleet to be in Germany to protect it. And so they were stationed in Brest in France, which of course was German-controlled at the time. And he laid this very sort of secretive plan to get the ships out and run them through the English Channel. We had spies in the port who delivered the news back to the Admiralty, and plans were put in place to stop this maneuver. And a whole bunch of aircraft and ships were redeployed from wherever they were to the south coast of England, ready to mount an offensive against these craft if they tried to traverse. And remember I said earlier, not since Napoleon had an enemy force got ships through the Channel. So it's a long time. We assumed it would be done at night. Basically a bunch of assumptions were made of how this would take place, and it didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. And the Admiralty turned around and said, well, you know what, we need these assets elsewhere, and redeployed the majority, not quite all, but the majority of the forces that were arrayed against this possible attack. And then, of course, it happened. And it didn't happen at night, moonlit or otherwise. It happened slap bang in the middle of the day, on a day that was incredibly foggy. And in some ways, that played to the Germans' advantage, because the guns at Dover, which, were a force to be reckoned with and could fire shells out halfway across the channel, had never fired on radar alone. And so when they did fire, they were hopeless. They didn't hit anything. Cut for a phone alarm there. There were motor torpedo boats that were, you didn't want to send those against heavy cruisers and battle cruisers and that sort of thing. But 5 of them went out into very rough seas and were fought back by a battery of escort ships. The entire German Luftwaffe, which is the Air Force, was flying cover over the top, which I believe reports have it at 293 aircraft in the air protecting these ships. And the majority of the British Air Forces had been redeployed, as I said. So 825 Swordfish Squadron, currently based at RAF Manston at this point in history, took off, and they were to meet their air cover, and they circled around, and eventually one squadron of Spitfires showed up, 10 of them, and they just decided to go anyway. So it was 6 Swordfish. You saw what they were like, against 293 Luftwaffe and the destroyer screen, supported solely by one squadron of Spitfires. A second squadron did show up in the middle of the fight, or right before the fight. But that's not odds you want to take. And with one squadron at the time at their staging area, Esmond took the decision and said, nope, we're going. This is the only chance we're going to get to do this. We've got to get these ships before they pass through the channel. We're going off to attack. And so off they flew in 2 Vic formations, 2 Vs. So 1 aircraft ahead and then 2 more flanking and slightly behind. And these 6 aircraft flew off with, 1 torpedo apiece, and went to go and attack this enormous force that was out in the English Channel. And it didn't go well, as you can imagine. The Swordfish had the advantage of being Swordfish, and therefore not something that the enemy really knew. Oh goodness, sorry. Really knew what to do with. And that was their biggest advantage, I think. There were Messerschmitt and Focke-Wulf aircraft up in the air, and they were. The problem was their speed. That's how I've heard it told. They would bypass the Swordfish so quickly because the Swordfish were moving so slowly that the fighters were having difficulty getting attacks in. Anyway, the aircraft got there, torpedoes went down, and unfortunately, I think besides necessitating a couple of changes of heading to avoid them, the flak screen from the ships and the attacks from the fighter craft were so significant that there was nothing that could be done to drop the torpedoes within a range that would be truly effective. It was too far away. There was nothing that could really be done to effectively do this. Now, there's a wonderful quote by Vice Admiral Otto Ciliax, who at the time was the commander of the Scharnhorst. And he said, the mothball attack, he described, I should say, because this sentence doesn't make sense without that, he described a mothball attack of a handful of ancient planes, piloted by men whose bravery surpasses any other action by either side that day. That says a lot when your enemy, the person who you are attacking, has that much respect for what you're doing. That says a huge amount. Anyway, I realize I've been talking through this and I haven't mentioned the connection. My grandfather piloted one of the 2 second, the second or third aircraft. I can't remember the order of battle. I think he was the 3rd aircraft. In the first Vic of Swordfish. So Esmond led the attack, and my grandfather was right behind him. And needless to say, none of the Swordfish came back. 13 of the crew, there were 18 crew, of course, because 3 crew per Swordfish. 13 of the crew were killed during the action, and 5 survived, including my grandfather. And one of them passed away later. He was killed later in the war, and the other 4 I met. The last of them crossed the bar, as they say in the Navy, passed away in 2010, I believe. I think I've got that right. And so I had the opportunity to know these men for many years, and honestly, 4 humbler men you would struggle to find. It took me a lot of needling to get some of the finer details out of my grandfather, and then I started doing some research into the whole thing and went into the National Archives at Kew in London, outside London, and I managed to get a hold of the Board of Inquiry transcript into the attack, and the detail is just extraordinary. There's one of the Spitfire pilots saw one of the Swordfish crew, the tailplane of one of the Swordfish, I think this was of the second wave of Swordfish, the tailplane caught fire. And the TAG, the telegraphist air gunner, who's in the back, facing backwards, obviously saw this happen, crawled out on his hands and knees to the back of the aircraft, in flight, beat the fire out with his bare hands, crawled back again, got back into his seat, and carried on firing. That's crazy. You put that in a movie, and it would look, like you were dramatizing something to have a moment that looked really cool. But one of the Spitfire pilots saw it. I know one of the men that survived talked about going to sit down later in the attack, and he'd been at his standing up trying to make himself heard, and he sat down, but there was nothing to sit on. His seat had gone. The stuff that these guys endured is crazy. Quite apart, and there's things you don't see, in this video, like to talk. They had what were called Gosport tubes, and it was basically cup and string, more or less. You had a tube that you just bellowed into and hoped that the other guy, behind you or in front of you, wherever he was in the aircraft, heard what you were saying. And they kept getting shot away, so they were bellowing over the top of, wind and gunfire and whatever else. It's quite extraordinary. And of course, as I mentioned, the survivors have all passed away. And that is a terribly sad thing, because it means that there are fewer people around to continue the story. And this is a story I grew up with. That and the Bismarck, because of course my grandfather told me about Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmond, as he was, when my grandfather served under him. I'm not sure what his rank was at the time of the Bismarck attack. But Esmond was awarded the Distinguished Service Order for his part in leading the attack of 825 Squadron against the Bismarck. He would then take part in further actions, and then when it came part of the Channel Dash, my grandfather, as well as 3 of the other survivors, were also awarded Distinguished Service Order. One was only mentioned in dispatches because he was a non-commissioned officer, and you basically, if I understand correctly, you either got mentioned in dispatches, which is sort of a recognition but not a medal, or you got the Victoria Cross, which is the highest award that the British Crown can bestow upon a member of the armed forces, and quite possibly just in general. Eugene Esmond received a Victoria Cross for leading the attack on the Scharnhorst and the Gneisenau. And that's an amazing thing. I have a book of all of the Victoria Crosses that were awarded from 1900 to 2000, I think. And, it's this thick. And it's just their obituaries describing what they did. And every single one of them is monumental. The things that they did, endured, risked, that were awarded, that caused them to be awarded these medals, were extraordinary. And so the fact that Esmond was awarded one for this says something about what this attack meant, everything about it, really. I met a VC, a Victoria Cross owner, later on, and he was an even humbler man, possibly, than my grandfather and his comrades from the squadron. It's an extraordinary thing. This tie, the reason I'm wearing this tie, how do I do this? We can see here, Channel Dash Association, and then there's the Swordfish crossing a ship, and 12th of February 1942. The Channel Dash Association, which later became the Channel Dash Memorial Trust, was formed in order to, remember this action and remember the people involved in it. And unfortunately, with everybody who was involved having passed on, the membership, for the most part, obviously myself being one of the exceptions, getting older. There weren't that many of us who were younger, and I think I was possibly the youngest for the last few years. The Memorial Trust closed down a couple of years ago. Very sadly, I was unable to attend the final service because of being in Canada. I couldn't go back to Madston and be there for the final service, which was very upsetting to me. But a combination of timing, funds, and the pandemic, I think, just didn't make it possible. But this is my way of doing that. I've been trying to do something with this. I started writing a play based on this, and I couldn't get it to go anywhere. I started thinking about filming it, but I've no idea how to get into that. I started making a board game based on it, actually, but that's horrendously complicated, and I didn't want it to be my first design because, I want to do this justice. But maybe for now, just these few moments, if you're still here with me, thank you for listening to this story, because it's something that's incredibly important to me, and I don't want it to be forgotten. For selfish reasons, of course, but also I think it is an incredible thing that these people did. The end of the story is that what the result of all of this was that the Scharnhorst and the Gneisenau were slowed down a little bit, and there were ships waiting for them on the east coast of England, or like coming down. They got them down there as fast as they possibly could, and they harried the ships as well. None of the ships was destroyed, but the Scharnhorst, I think it was, did hit a mine a little bit later, and ended up in dry dock once it got back to Germany, and the two ships made it to Germany, but never left port again. And so, at the very least, while the ships, stayed floating, and for the sake of the lives of the sailors on board, I'm grateful for that, the actual threat of the ships was removed from the German armed forces. And that was a huge boon, because if they'd been able to be effective from around the corner, that would have been a bad thing. But the other thing is that what was deemed to be almost impossible was achieved, which was that an enemy force successfully passed through the English Channel, whether or not it was to any benefit in the long run. And that was quite a momentous thing as well. So yeah, all in all, very extraordinary. And I think that's that. I just wanted to share that because I think, these moments in history are powerful, and I think they show us a lot of... war is an absolutely terrible thing, but the one thing I guess I will say is that the bravery that kind of people find, and the extraordinary things that people do to save friends, to save home, to save whatever it is they're fighting for. While the fighting is terrible, the bravery is astonishing. And I guess I take this as a moment for myself, just to pay tribute to anyone who does or has served in any army, because that's a pretty terrible thing to have to go through, whether it's 60 years ago, 1,000 years ago, or today. And yeah, this is for them, for those who have given their lives or who have served in the past, for those doing so right now, and I think, yeah, especially currently to those fighting to defend their homes in the Ukraine. Lest we forget.